the industry volunteer committees here at Queen's Chamber. And those who are chamber members, if you're interested in participating within any of our working groups, please feel free to reach out to me and we will make that happen. And without further ado, Doug Wendt, Chief Growth Officer at Wendt Partners with 25 years of amazing experience, is going to share with you the power of the pivot. Mr. Wendt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Gross, and thank you, Mr. Gretsch. It's an honor to be here. And by the way, I'm Doug Wendt. I am a proud Queen's Chamber member. I am speaking to you from my living room, located in Rego Park. So I'm looking out toward the LIE one way, and the other way I'm looking out toward Queens Boulevard. Our company's been around for 15 years. We actually started in Pennsylvania, grew the business in DC, and then I was very excited to grow the business to New York because I grew up as a Northern New Jersey kid with a dad who worked in Newark at Prudential, which of course is one of the long-standing companies that has stayed the course through the ups and downs of the city of Newark. And he had a real commitment, my father, to economic development, which is something that I'm very passionate about. So I'm simply going to say this about our company, just to give you the very short overview. We are a growth consulting firm. So we work on business strategy with business owners to help them figure out ways to find the right market opportunities, the best ways to grow, whether that's through acquisition of other businesses, whether that's through their own sales efforts, things of this nature. So we advise. In addition to that, I'm also the executive director of a group called the B2b Growth Forum, which a group of businesses here in New York City started 2 years ago. And we actually have a great affiliation also with the Queens College Technology Incubator, where I serve on the advisory board. And it's a great, great group of people. So I'm really excited to be with you all today. I want to emphasize something, just thinking about all the different kinds of businesses here. I'm going to share some stories and examples, some of which are going to be directly relevant to some of you and others of which will not be directly relevant. I'm going to try to give a number of different scenarios and ideas so that everybody has something to leave with. But I recognize that the nature of the challenges that we've faced this year, the cause is the same. The nature of those challenges is very distinct to the kinds of sectors that you're in. And Alan, I actually used to run a CVB in a past life as well. So I was glad to hear of your background in that, and I'd love to chat with you further about that post-program. So I just wanted to say that up front. But here's what I want to share with you. I'm going to talk about two kinds of ways to leverage this concept of the pivot. One is probably what you're expecting to zero in on, which is what are strategies we can use to rethink how we go about managing and growing our companies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But then the other side of it is actually changing the story that we tell. And I'm kind of debating which way to begin. So I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of the two together. So it's interesting. The reason I used to run a convention and visitors bureau is because I actually got hired to turn around a failing economic development agency in Pennsylvania. And as part of that, tourism was part of the picture. But what was significant about that is that I wasn't from the community. I was the transplant, and it was very politically controversial for a non-local to be hired to run the local economic development agency. But I'll tell you something that it did for me, and that is that it gave me a fresh perspective on what this community had to offer the world. And so I'm going to tell you that there are a number of things that we did to pivot our company, and between February 15th and March 15th, we watched about $50,000 of new business vanish overnight, which rapidly snowballed into over $100,000 of business by the time we got into the worst of it in April. So we felt the pain right along with everybody else. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we did. Which again, I recognize that not everybody can do. We sort of fall into three categories here. Our business is not licensed in a particular state. We don't have to worry about geography. We're able to do business anywhere. Our big pivot was to not worry about geography and just go for it and try to see if we could do business in other parts of the country. In fact, in the early days of the crisis, we actually built a map that was based originally on the New York Times reporting of what states had low COVID activity and what states had high, and also where lockdowns and restrictions were taking place. And we literally tried to stay one step ahead of the virus and started doing cold calls and cold emails to prospects in states that were having low impact. There's a fascinating irony about that, which is that as we got into the summer, those clients started having COVID cases and crises, but because they knew we'd already been through a lot of this, they were then relying on us for advice. So it's fascinating to me sort of to watch that happen. That was the big change for us, was to throw open the doors to the geographic picture. I recognize that everybody here can do that, so I'll also share some ideas that are more oriented toward our geographic community here. But let me take a moment to discuss this second thing, which I think is extraordinarily important, and I can literally tell you has had a transformative impact on how we sell. And that is, we sell queens. And I mean that quite literally, like to the point where in our sales presentations, we talk about why it is a smart decision for company XYZ to partner with a firm that is based in Queens, New York City. And in fact, we are incorporating the story of Queens and our proud membership in the Queens Chamber into that. And here's why. If there's one thing that became clear in the politics of this year, it's that the country's divide, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, isn't really driven by party or politics. It's driven by rural versus urban. And the reality is most suburbanites think of themselves as rural, even though they rely on a world that is urban. And in fact, most rural Americans rely on urban America and they don't know it. So when I was an economic development director in Pennsylvania, my agency sat on the border between urban Pennsylvania and rural Pennsylvania. So I led economic development for Cumberland County, which is, if anybody's familiar with the U.S. Army War College or Dickinson College, the town of Carlisle, it's that area. It goes from Harrisburg over to literally the edge of the Allegheny Ridge. So on one end, it's very urban, very educated, sophisticated. On the other end, it's farmland and forest. And you can imagine the political challenges that that creates. But one thing that people in my community at the time understood, the farmers understood that they needed the urbanites, and the urbanites understood in a way that most urbanites don't, that they needed the farmers. The geography, the fact that those two worlds were so close together, helped create a level of understanding. And what I've been learning this year is that the rest of America needs to know the story of New York and of Queens, especially now. And in fact, it's an extraordinarily powerful sales tool. So I literally, in sales calls with prospective clients, am regularly saying, because they're curious, how are things going in New York? Are you guys okay? What's, and I tell them, well, it's been a horrible year. I mean, for all of us, the sirens, I'm literally positioned off 99th Street. So on one side is Forest Hills Hospital, the other is Elmhurst Hospital. With the LIE in the middle, it was literally nonstop sirens for 3 months. So I don't sugarcoat it. This has been a horrendous year for New York City and for the region. But the reality is we're still here. We are all here doing something. And that really communicates a level of grit that fascinates people. The other thing that I've done is I've really focused on the diversity of our team. So we've built a team that has people who are New Yorkers from with backgrounds from Colombia. We actually just added a new team member whose family is from Guyana. And that is part of our story as well. And we're selling today mostly to white middle America. And again, what I'm finding is that people are intrigued, they're impressed, they're curious, they want to know more. So I cannot stress this enough. We have a story that people want to hear, and that is that we have done an enormous amount as a community to pull together. We are a microcosm of the world. This is the American dream literally happening outside our doors. We are part of that dream, and we should tell that story as much as possible. And I want to call out in particular Brendan's daughter, Emma, who produced that amazing video with Ray Romano that Tom and the team made happen, talking about Queens Rising. I still share that as much as I can. So even, in fact, I'll even share with you, we haven't launched our new website yet, but we're in the process of finishing it. And I just wanted to show you, we actually have put Made in Queens, New York City. That's going to go to a special page on the site talking about what it means to be a business in the world's borough. So that's the first thing that I want to share is, when in doubt, tell the story of us, tell the story of this community, tell the story of what we've been through and what we're doing to move forward as a community. I think New Yorkers tend to assume that the rest of the world kind of understands us, or that they don't understand us. No matter what we say, it's not going to be explainable. Neither is true. We have clients in Missouri now, we have clients in Florida, we have clients in California. And before COVID, we had clients purely in the Northeast corridor. And I'm very relieved to say some of those clients are starting to bounce back. Now, let me talk about the other side of it. Our New York clients. We have a company that's a printer in Soho that lost 93% of their business in 3 weeks. You know, we have a law firm that saw that a lot of their business was related to the industries that have been impacted. So by no means were our clients spared. What was fascinating is what people did in response. And I'll tell you an example of 2 commercial real estate firms, both of whom are focused on small businesses, subleases, as well as traditional leases of office space in Manhattan. And this story, I think, is both exciting and also sort of a telling tale. So I happen to know the owners of both of these firms. One of them was a former client, and so I stayed in touch. And when COVID hit, one of them said, we have to really rethink what we're focusing on. And the question isn't so much what can we sell, it's what can we communicate to keep us in people's front of mind. And this is something we can all do. Okay. And that is, what can we communicate to help other people make decisions they have to make? So that firm started focusing on becoming essentially the definitive news source for what's happening on the ground in the Manhattan real estate market, and not just the real estate market. What are small business owners doing? What are small companies doing? What's going on with COVID strategies in terms of reentry to the office? What are economic development programs that might be able to help the companies that they serve? They really said, we want clients and prospective clients to have us top of mind and to have a positive feeling and a recognition that we're bringing value to the table. That was firm A. They've had a horrendously rough year, but they're still here. Firm B, on the other hand, said, you know, we're just going to sort of ride this out. We do one thing and one thing well, and that's that we're brokers. We're not in the information business. That's not the kind of people we are. We're brokers. We sit and we make deals. We don't like write and talk and communicate and those things. And they waited and they waited and they waited, and the bottom fell out. And they are in the process of selling the office condo that they just finished remodeling. They're liquidating all the assets that they can so that the owners can survive, because the firm is basically done. And there are so many conditions here. I'm not trying to say owner A did it all right, owner B did it all not right. That's not my point. There's no right or wrong. This situation is so all-encompassing that we're all, you know, just to even be able to make sure that you got food on the table is a miracle this year. And I know Tom and the team know that very viscerally, because they are on the front lines like firefighters dealing with the companies that whose owners are losing everything or at risk of losing everything. So I never want to lose sight of that. But the reality is, people have to rethink. And the number one thing I think holds people back is the idea that they don't have a story to tell, which is why I shared the Queen's story. But beyond that, who would have thought that I would now be actively reading every weekly update I get from a commercial real estate firm in Manhattan, because it's clearly have the finger on the pulse of what's going on. They made themselves an indispensable resource. And I know I'm not the only person who feels that way. And before COVID, they would have said, that's not what we do. So I really cannot emphasize that enough. Our printer, who lost 93% of their business in that first 3 weeks, they were all driven by geographic proximity. Okay. They were spending $10,000 a month on local search. And all of a sudden that just stopped. And so a couple of questions came up. Number one, are we communicating proactively with everyone who's ever done business with us? Typically the answer is no. And for them, it was generally no. They had been in order receiving mode, not in relationship building mode. So we had to retrain the sales team and rethink the entire process of what we're doing. But then the other thing is, what can we share that will be of help and value to the people who are our customers? So they started down the road of rethinking that and started communicating. And another thing that is instructive for them, their example is customer roundtables. So, you know, a lot of people are hesitant about doing, like, there's a lot of talk about Zoom fatigue, and so now I'm seeing people give a lot of pushback about, well, we really should really do webinars. There's so many webinars. The reality is, you know, that's like saying people are sick and tired of having lunches, so let's stop having lunch. Of course, people are sick and tired of it. I get it. We're all sick and tired of the whole situation. That's not a reason to stop communicating. Okay. And if you're not sure what to do, then what you do is pull together people and ask them questions. So one of the things I'm seeing a lot of companies who are pushing forward do is open up roundtables, get customers together, get them talking, have them interact, have a guided discussion. People are feeling alone. They're feeling confused. We're all kind of wondering what's going to happen next year. Are we ready to ramp up the recovery? Are we still in the red zone? Like, you know, it's still a really confusing time. Communication in two ways. One is proactive, outbound, and the other is interactive. Between you and your customers, between you and your partners, anyone in your ecosystem. Convene. This is the word that I really want to emphasize. Convene. Don't let the situation paralyze you. So the key to the pivot is really getting people together and engaging people in communication. And, you know, I look at the chamber. I mean, we've been a member of every borough chamber since we established our New York operation. And the only one, to be quite blunt, that really has been aggressive about convening. They're all doing stuff. I'm not trying to criticize the others. Okay. They're doing different things. But this chamber is all about keeping the community together and keeping people talking to one another and helping one another. That is an emotional energy that is a totally different thing than you see in a lot of other contexts. And I think other people need to learn from this playbook. Okay, because that's the authentic stuff that lasts, that people remember. Which brings me to another thing, which is that whole line between the business and the personal. It's still important for us all to have our private personal lives. I get that. But the reality is those lines are a lot more blurred, and they need to be right now. And they may stay that way. I mean, our younger employees are much more fluid about the business personal divide anyway. And we've really had to rethink how we create a culture, you know, because we're not in the office together. I mean, I've literally, and I know we're all in different situations in terms of office reoccupancy. So I'm not saying you should do what we've done, but the building where our office was, we actually moved it from actually a Spaces Center to a Regis Center. We used the co-working spaces. We were at Spaces Long Island City. They had so many COVID shutdowns that I finally just said, you know, it's not worth pulling the team in, even though it's a beautiful place and we love to get together. Now we're over here so I can walk to the office in Forest Hills. But the reality is we're all virtual still right now. And so this is another thing I'll mention. Again, talk about community, talk about communication. I had no idea how much time and effort it would take to keep a team going virtually. Before I joined this call, so back in March, we started doing a weekly meetup call every Monday morning at 8:15. Then it became twice a week, then 3 times a week. Now it's 5 days a week. Every day of the week, we get together for an 8:15 a.m. meetup call. And the number one goal for me is to bring energy to that. So I'm at a standing desk right now, which is something I didn't have before. And I stand up for those meetings. We share personal stories. We usually have a question of the week. So you guys will get a kick out of this. The question of the week was, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen on the subway? So, you know, it doesn't have to be business. It could be something funny, something just to get people talking and energized and relaxed. We literally do a morning stretch. Okay. So now I've had to think about what it means to spend 30 to 45 minutes a day just motivating and engaging the team. And then I have to check in with each of the teams over the course of the day. And that's another thing I'll share is any way you can to connect digitally. So we've been using Slack, which is, how many of you have heard of Slack or use Slack? Just by a raise of hands. Okay, so Slack it's to put it in straightforward terms, it's like text messaging or Facebook messaging, but in a business environment. In fact, just yesterday, Salesforce.com announced that they're buying Slack. Probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest acquisition during the COVID era. And the thing about Slack, and this is why I share it with all of you, it's not just for your own team. It can also be for communication with clients and others. So in Slack, we've started testing, creating a channel in Slack, which is sort of like a private messaging space where we're talking with our client. So client A has this messaging space, and the team assigned to support that client is in that space. Okay. And the reason this is important is it helps get us into the mode of we are in a live conversation. When we need to talk with one another, it's the virtual equivalent of looking over the divider between two cubicles and talking to the person next door. So we are really learning and having to learn what it means to operate, because even when COVID's over, we're going to be a hybrid organization. I think we're going to go back to having an office presence. That's the plan. But I don't think we'll go back to having everybody in that situation. And so all the changes that we're having to make, these are here forever. And on top of that, we have clients we may never meet in person, which is something I've never done before. I've always had a handshake. I've always met in person with our clients. But I can tell you that making this change, I honestly won't look back. I want to continue, like actually tomorrow morning, I'm having breakfast with that printer, CEO, socially distanced outside breakfast in Brooklyn. He's the one client we've been able to continue to meet in person. But the reality is it's always going to be hybrid. And I actually think that's a hidden advantage long-term. The last thing I'll say is on talent. Because of the fact that geographic limitations are no longer present, I'm also advising a lot of our smaller clients to use this opportunity to recruit, okay? And the reason for that is that you can find people who are highly talented who are not in the geography you have ever would have considered before and bring them into your team. It's an enormous opportunity for small companies because traditionally, like we have a law firm in Connecticut that's always struggled to recruit because attorneys wanted to be in the city. And I'm not opposed to attorneys being in the city. But now that firm can recruit an attorney who lives in Westchester County who might have gone either way, but didn't really want to work in Bridgeport or Trumbull. And now the option is that for the time being, they can work from home and we can deal with the rest in the future. So I know I'm sort of brainstorming some ideas here. I want to open it up to conversation and questions for our remaining time, but I'm going to end with what I started with, which is the fact that the story of Queens and what we've been through and what we're going through and how we're adapting, we are in a position to lead the rest of the country out of this by example. And they want to hear that story. And I tell you, when you share it with them, it's inspirational and it has a business impact. It's become part of our brand story, and I think it always will be. So with that, let me open it up to questions and conversation.
Hi, Doug. So that's a great presentation. Certainly gets your creative juices and thoughts, flowing, so to speak. And it's interesting, in terms of the pivot or what you have to do. And I have to tell you, in March, I was like, I talk about Zoom. Zoom was like a 4-letter word to me. So yes. All of a sudden, I had to learn it, and oh my God! So now I'm so excited because I actually was able to get that background on it. I feel like
yes.
I feel like, oh my God, I'm a genius. So anyway, there you go.
You did it, yes.
Yeah, but one of the things we've done with the law firm, and although Ron has always done a lot of speaking, and we were in the throes of doing some really interesting things, planning for different events, and that's the primary thing I do for the practice, events and putting together different programs. And we obviously adapted to Zoom. That right. Through the last eight plus months, we've been able to do a whole series of different Zoom webinars and putting together things that you would not, first of all, I'm a slightly crazy person. So, put together things that.
That's why you fit in Queens.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was born in Queens. So Hollis Hills. So there you go.
You got it.
My parents took me screaming and crying out to Massapequa when I was 9 years old. Anyway, so, but we've done this whole series of really, I mean, like nothing is 100%, but really fascinating webinars with different connections. Like I'm looking at, you know, who is on this call, you know, the 16 people, and different ways that we can work together. And as a matter of fact, we're doing something on a week from tomorrow. What we've transitioned or looking at is focusing on and spotlighting different not-for-profits, because you know it's kind of like social responsibility and everything and not-for-profits, and I'm a person with a very vast extensive not-for-profit background, so people are hurting out there. But Ron does, as an elder law attorney, one of the things he does is pet trusts, and so we think that that's, you know, and we've heard a lot of things about what's going on with pets. So I know I'm taking up too much time.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, so I was able to attract two not-for-profit organizations. One is Paws of New York in Manhattan. The other is the Nassau County SPCA, not to be confused with the ASPCA. They're two different organizations, to talk about what they do, their mission, their goals, and Ron to talk about pet trust, because, you know, people are, you know, once again, I hate to be so dismal, what do you do with your pet? God forbid something happens to you, and especially so unexpectedly. So, and you know, like I said, I already wrote down some people's names because I think there's some potential to connect on that and to do really, you know, dynamic and robust programs. So it's kind of thinking out of the box and making new friends and expanding your horizons. So that's my pivot story.
I think that's awesome, Vicki. And I'll tell you, I have a friend who was the head of AV operations for one of the top hotels in Midtown. And it's one of the hotels whose operations are completely shut down right now. And he had to pivot to basically being a virtual events consultant. And so we partnered together and produced a webinar, and he's in Staten Island. So not only that, we crossed the border between Staten Island and Queens. It's a miracle. So yes, you have to think out of the box. Look at your friends and colleagues and your network and think, how can we partner together? How can we do things together? That energy translates. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Doug, I'd just like to add something to this, talking about pivoting and turning. So my consulting business, you know, I have many different verticals in my consulting business.
Yes.
I have the construction vertical, I have a technology vertical, I have a security vertical, and I also launched right after, in April, Savoca Health, which included online learning for training for returning back to the workplace safely during COVID, as well as supplying PPE. This was something that I was sitting on the couch and saying, well, what the heck am I going to do, since I just watched all my contracts for consulting blow up?
Yes.
In addition to that, under my technology division, if you look up above my head here, you'll see a QR code. And I have been working with a former IBM executive.
I'm taking a picture of the code right now.
Okay. So let me tell you about how this works. Okay. So we are all Zoom. We're over Zoomed, under Zoomed, Zoomed. So, but what happens in Zoom? Zoom is not always interactive. And what happens is that we are forced or compelled, or for lack of any other platform, is to run into the chat to try to connect, just like we suggested on this call.
Yes.
This is a solution. What it's called is the Q Code by Mojave, and it's available for free online at the App Store for both Apple and Android. And what this does is it gives you a platform to capture your information, and by basically putting this Q code in your backdrop, anyone that also participates in this platform can click on it, and immediately, not only do you get that information, but you get a nice email that says, hey, Doug, great to meet you today on the call at Queen's Chamber. Love to connect and see how we can do business.
That's awesome.
Okay, so as we all know, I'm a complete, you know, I love to be in people's, you know, in their space.
Painting their closets. Yes.
Right. I attended more events than I'd rather admit to. However, what happens is, and we're all guilty of this, is that we take that business card and the odds of it getting into our database or CRM is slim and none. And what this does is it eliminates. The statistics show that the average person, the average salesperson in our lifetime of their career collects 30,000 business cards, okay? Less than 1% of them get into their actual database within the first 7 days. So here's the deal. This program, I've now created what we call a virtual networking solution, or platform, so that you can not only attend a call, but as you're in the call, you can connect and you can start that conversation. This platform also, for you event planners, has a revenue stream that's generated from advertising. I'd love to talk to any of you that are interested. I think that this is something that's going, and let me just be clear that this is not something that's only going to be when we're in virtual. When we are back in front of each other, the days of the business card, and this hurts my heart because my husband was a printer, still is a printer, half dead printer, but he's a printer, okay? But printing is a way of the past. Technology is coming. Sustainability is key and foremost important to many of the corporations. I'm right now speaking to, we've done events now for the UN. We've done events for some of the larger not-for-profits along the country. And we're in the process now of working with UPS and Disney. So this is something that is not going to go, I'm proud to say, I don't think going to go away. I have a brilliant affiliate partner who is just cutting edge, and we're just improving this technology. So I invite you, any of you that'd like to connect with me, love to share it, especially for that virtual space. And we also are a authorized Zoom partner.
Aha. Awesome, Sharon. Thank you.
So when your Zooming doesn't work, we can help you.
Well, I know we need to hand it back to Jeff. So I just want to say thank you all. And, post-program, of course, I'm happy to continue any dialogue. It's been a great conversation. And I want to thank Jeff and the Chamber for the opportunity to be with you today.
Doug, thank you so much for that insightful information that I'm sure everyone on the call is able to use.